allowed me to meet her at a time when I was searching for something I couldn't explain. She came into my life quietly, like a peaceful morning after a long storm, and from the very first conversation I felt a connection that was impossible to ignore. We talked for hours without getting tired, sharing stories about our past, our dreams, and the future we both imagined. Slowly, she became the most important part of my day. The person I looked forward to talking to, the one who made everything feel right, even when life was difficult. I truly believed she was my soulmate, the one God had chosen for me. Every night I prayed and thanked Jesus for bringing her into my life, believing that this was a blessing I had been waiting for. But sometimes, what feels like destiny is only a lesson in disguise. As time passed, I began to notice small changes in her. The warmth in her voice started fading, her messages became shorter, and the excitement we once shared slowly disappeared. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that love requires patience and understanding. But deep inside, my heart already knew something was wrong. One day, she finally told me the truth that shattered everything I believed. She said she had started loving someone else, someone who made her feel different, someone she wanted to be with. In that moment, it felt like my entire world collapsed. The dreams I had built, the future I'd imagined, everything broke into pieces. I smiled in front of her to hide my pain, but inside I was completely broken. That night, I walked alone, asking Jesus why this had happened to me, why the person I believed was my soulmate was never truly mine. Days turned into nights filled with silence and memories that refused to fade. I kept replaying every moment we shared, wondering if I had missed a sign or misunderstood her feelings. The pain felt endless, like a wound that refused to heal. But in my lowest moment, I did something I had never done before. I stopped asking why and started asking Jesus to give me strength. I prayed not for her to come back, but for my heart to find peace again. Slowly, something began to change inside me. The pain didn't disappear instantly, but it became lighter with each passing day. I realized that love is not about holding someone who doesn't choose you. Real love is about acceptance, even when it hurts. Weeks later, I saw her again, smiling and happy with the man she had chosen. For a second, my heart felt the old pain, but then something unexpected happened. I felt calm. I understood that she was never meant to stay in my life forever. She was a chapter, not the whole story. And that chapter, as painful as it was, had taught me something valuable. God sometimes removes people from our lives not because we are not good enough, but because He has something better planned for us. Today, I no longer see that experience as a loss. I see it as a moment where Jesus quietly guided me toward a stronger version of myself. I still believe in soulmates, but now I understand that the right person will never walk away from what God has planned. And if you are listening to this while your heart is hurting, remember this: Jesus sees your pain, hears your prayers, and is preparing something far greater than what you lost. Sometimes the person you call your soulmate is only a lesson, and the real blessing is still on the way. Even after I told myself that I had moved on, there were still moments when the silence felt heavy and the memories returned without warning. I would sit alone and think about the small things that once meant everything to me. The way she used to smile, the way her voice sounded when she said my name, and the dreams we once shared as if they were already real. It was difficult to accept that those moments were now just memories and nothing more. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about me the same way I thought about her, or if I had simply become a chapter she had already closed in her life. But as time passed, I began to understand something deeper about love and about myself. Not every connection is meant to last forever, and not every person we love is meant to stay. One evening, While I was walking alone under the quiet sky, I looked up and saw the stars shining brightly. In that moment, I felt something peaceful inside my heart, as if Jesus was reminding me that even in darkness, there is always light. I realized that my life was not defined by one person or one heartbreak. There was still so much more waiting for me, so many moments I had yet to experience, and so many blessings I had yet to receive. I started focusing on myself, on becoming stronger, wiser, and more patient with life. I learned to appreciate the small things again, like a calm morning, a quiet evening, and the simple feeling of being at peace with my own thoughts. Slowly, the pain that once felt unbearable began to fade into something softer, something that no longer controlled my emotions. One day, I met someone new, not in a dramatic way, but in a simple and natural moment. We started talking, just like I once did before, but this time I was different. I was not rushing to call it love or trying to build a future too quickly. I had learned that true connection takes time, and the right person will never make you feel uncertain about where you stand in their life. As I continued moving forward, I realized that everything I had gone through was shaping me into the person I needed to become. The heartbreak, the confusion, the sleepless nights, all of it had a purpose. It taught me patience, it taught me strength, and most importantly, it taught me faith. Today, when I look back at that chapter of my life, I no longer feel sadness or regret. Instead, I feel grateful. Grateful for the lessons, grateful for the growth, and grateful for the way Jesus guided me through the most difficult time of my life, because now I understand something I didn't understand before. When God removes someone from your life, it is not to leave you empty, but to create space for something better. And maybe, just maybe, the person meant for me is still out there, waiting for the right moment, the right time, and the right version of me. Until that moment comes, I will continue to trust Jesus, knowing that His plan is always greater than anything I could imagine on my own. As time continued to move forward, I began to notice something I had never understood before. Healing does not happen in one moment. It happens slowly, quietly, in the small changes we don't even realize at first. There were days when I still felt the weight of the past, but there were also days when I felt lighter, as if my heart was learning to breathe again. I stopped looking at my phone hoping for her message, and I stopped replaying old conversations in my mind. Instead, I started focusing on the present, on the life that was still in front of me. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual and decided to step outside. The air was calm, the sky was clear, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace that I could not explain. It felt like Jesus was gently reminding me that life goes on, that pain is only temporary, and that every ending carries the beginning of something new. I realized that I had been holding on to someone who had already let go, and in doing so, I was stopping myself from moving forward. That day I made a decision. Not a loud or dramatic one, but a quiet promise to myself that I would no longer live in the past. I would not allow one chapter of my life to define my entire story. I started doing things that made me feel alive again, spending time with people who truly cared about me, focusing on my goals, and building a life that did not depend on someone else's presence. Slowly, I began to see the beauty in my journey, even in the painful parts, because without those moments, I would not have discovered my own strength. I would not have learned how to stand alone and still feel complete. And most importantly, I would not have understood the depth of faith that comes from trusting Jesus during the hardest times. There came a moment when I realized that I had changed. I was no longer the same person who once believed that happiness depended on someone else. I had grown into someone who understood that true peace comes from within, and from trusting God's plan, even when it doesn't make sense. One evening, As I sat quietly thinking about everything that had happened, I felt a deep sense of gratitude in my heart. Not for the pain itself, but for the person it helped me become. Because now I knew that the right person will never make you question your worth, will never make you feel like you are not enough, and will never walk away from the love that God has written for you. And if someone does leave, it simply means they were not meant to stay in your story. I no longer feared the future because I trusted that whatever comes next is part of a plan greater than anything I could create on my own. And maybe one day I will meet someone who understands my heart in a way that feels natural, someone who chooses me without hesitation, someone who stays not because they have to, but because they truly want to. Until that day comes, I will continue to walk forward with faith, knowing that Jesus is guiding every step I take, because now I understand a truth that changed my life completely. Sometimes losing someone is not a failure, it is a redirection, a quiet way for God to lead you towards something better, something real, something that will not break your heart, but instead complete it in a way you never expected. And even after all those changes inside me, life still had more to teach, because growth does not stop when the pain fades. It continues in the quiet moments when we begin to understand who we truly are without the people we once depended on. There were days when I felt strong and confident, but there were also unexpected moments when memories would return without warning, like a song playing in the background of my mind, reminding me of a time when everything felt certain and simple. But this time, those memories did not break me the way they once did. Instead, they reminded me of how far I'd come. I began to see my past not as something painful to escape from, but as something meaningful that shaped my journey. One evening, while sitting alone and watching the sunset, I realized that life had been slowly guiding me toward a version of myself that I had never known before. A version that did not rely on anyone else for happiness. A version that could stand alone and still feel complete. It was in that moment that I truly understood the power of faith, not just as something we speak about, but as something we live through every day. I remembered all the nights I'd cried, all the questions I had asked Jesus, all the moments I felt lost and uncertain, and I realized that through all of it, He had never left me. Even when I couldn't feel His presence, He was there, guiding me, protecting me, and slowly leading me towards something better. I started to look at my life differently, not as a series of random events, but as a carefully written story where every chapter had a purpose. The love I once had, the heartbreak I experienced, and the healing that followed were all part of a bigger plan that I was only beginning to understand. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I found myself becoming more patient with life. I stopped rushing into emotions and stopped expecting instant answers. Instead, I learned to trust the timing of everything, believing that what is meant for me will come at the right moment without force or confusion. One day, while having a simple conversation with someone new, I felt something different. There was no pressure, no fear of losing, no need to prove anything. It felt calm, natural, and real. And for the first time, I didn't rush to call it love, because I had learned that real love grows slowly and stays strong without uncertainty. That moment made me realize how much I had changed. The person I was before would have held on tightly, afraid of losing something special. But now, I understood that what is truly meant for you will never require you to hold on with fear. It will stay because it belongs in your life. I began to appreciate the journey more than the destination, understanding that every step forward, no matter how small, was bringing me closer to the life God had planned for me. I no longer compared my story to others because I knew that everyone walks a different path and every path has its own timing. There were still moments of reflection, moments where I thought about the person I once loved, But those thoughts no longer carried pain. Instead, they carried a quiet gratitude for the lessons learned and the strength gained. Because without that experience, I would not have become the person I am today. I would not have learned how to trust God completely, even when life doesn't make sense. I would not have discovered the peace that comes from letting go of what is not meant for me. And most importantly, I would not have understood that true love is not something we chase, but something that finds us when the time is right. As I continued moving forward, I felt a deep sense of confidence in my heart, not because everything was perfect, but because I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. I trusted that every delay, every disappointment, and every unexpected turn in my life was leading me towards something greater. And maybe one day, I will meet the person who sees me for who I truly am, someone who values my presence, respects my heart, and chooses to stay not just in good moments, but in every moment. Until that day arrives, I will continue to grow, to learn, and to trust the process that God has placed in front of me. Because now I understand something that once felt impossible to accept. The person I thought was my soulmate was not the end of my story, but the beginning of my transformation. And sometimes, what feels like a painful goodbye is actually God's way of preparing you for a love that is real, lasting, and meant only for you. So if you are listening to this and holding on to someone who has already let go, remember this truth with all your heart. You are not losing your soulmate. You are being guided toward the one who will never leave. Trust Jesus, trust the timing, and trust that the love meant for you will find its way into your life at the perfect moment when you are ready to receive it without fear, without doubt, and without pain. Even as I continued walking forward with a stronger heart and a clearer mind, life still found ways to remind me that growth is not a straight path, but a journey filled with quiet reflections and unexpected realizations. There were moments when I would sit alone and think about everything that had happened, not with sadness anymore, but with a deeper understanding that only time can give. I began to notice how much I had changed, how the person who once feared losing someone had now learned to value himself more than the fear of being alone. I started to understand that love should never feel like something you are begging to keep. It should feel like something that naturally stays. One evening, while walking through a quiet street, I saw a couple laughing together, and for a brief second, a memory crossed my mind. But instead of feeling pain, I felt something different. I felt hope. Hope that one day I too would experience a love that is peaceful, steady, and true. It was in that moment I realized that my story was not behind me. It was still being written, and the best parts had not even happened yet. I began to focus more on my purpose, on the things that truly mattered in my life, and on becoming the kind of person who is ready for the right love when it arrives. I spent more time improving myself, learning new things, and building a life that made me proud. Slowly, I stopped looking for happiness in other people and started creating it within myself. And the more I did that, the more I felt a sense of freedom that I had never experienced before. I was no longer tied to the past, no longer waiting for something that was never meant to return. I was finally living in the present, appreciating every small moment, every quiet victory, and every step forward. One day, while sitting alone and thinking about my journey, I realized something powerful. The pain I once felt was not there to destroy me, it was there to transform me. It pushed me to grow, to understand myself better, and to build a stronger connection with Jesus. Because in my weakest moments, when I felt like I had nothing left, I found the strength that came from faith. I found a peace that the world could not give, a peace that stayed even when everything around me changed. And that peace became my foundation. I no longer feared heartbreak the way I once did, because I knew that no matter what happens, I would be okay. I had learned how to stand on my own, how to trust God's plan, and how to move forward without looking back. As time passed, I started meeting new people, having new experiences, and opening my heart again, but this time with wisdom instead of blind hope. I was no longer searching for someone to complete me, because I had already learned to feel complete on my own. Instead, I was waiting for someone who would add to my life, not someone I needed to depend on. And that changed everything. I became more patient, more calm, and more confident in my journey. I trusted that the right person would come at the right time, without confusion, without pain, and without doubt. Because real love does not create fear, it creates peace. And as I continued moving forward, I carried one truth with me in every step I took: that everything happens for a reason, even the things we do not understand at first; that every person who enters our life has a purpose, whether they stay or leave; and that sometimes the greatest blessings come after the greatest losses. I no longer saw my past as something painful, but as something meaningful. It was a part of my story that helped me grow into who I am today. And now, when I look ahead, I do so with hope instead of fear, with faith instead of doubt, because I know that Jesus is guiding my path, leading me towards something greater than I can imagine. And maybe one day, when I meet the person who is truly meant for me, I will understand why everything had to happen the way it did. Until then, I will continue walking forward with strength, with faith, and with the belief that the best chapters of my life are still waiting to be written.